Police don't solve mental health. Behavioral health experts do.
Wow, that started suddenly. But okay. Police don't solve mental health. Behavioral health experts do. So, what does the behavioral health expert do at the scene of a man wielding knives at innocent people? Presuming he's suffering from a mental health issue in the first place, which of course you can't necessarily know about or certainly diagnose in the middle of an emergency, but let's just say that you know that to be a fact, the behavioral health expert then, what? Snaps their fingers and solves mental health before someone gets hurt? Got it?
Policing can't solve homelessness. Homes do.
Maybe I missed the part where it was ever the police's responsibility to solve homelessness. I mean, unless you're holding the police to account as having failed on an issue that they were never expected to remedy in the first place? I mean, you wouldn't be doing that, would you?
Policing doesn't solve addiction. Treatment and care does.
Yeah, again, I was not aware it was the purview of police to solve addiction. Maybe you're confused. Police handle law enforcement, not utopia construction. What should non-police first responders look like? Well, truth be told, I am very curious to know. The current rhetoric around defunding or abolishing the police is a fascinating mental exercise. The most concrete ideas I've been presented with, in relative terms, are fast response justice teams, wherein people from a given community essentially police their own, made up of social and mental health care workers. And outside of that seemingly naive idea, I haven't heard much else. So, is this idea any different?
All communities have problems. All communities get into crisis. All communities want public safety, but not all communities feel comfortable calling 911, and not all communities feel comfortable having the police in their home.
All right. Stipulated for the sake of argument, not everyone feels at ease getting the police involved, either in certain situations or at all. So, what is the alternative? Alright, so as happens often in this video, we get several seconds of nothing but music with cards showing text. So in each instance, I'll just recite and respond as we go. Advocates say that reforming our emergency response system to prioritize outreach services, drug counseling, and mental health resources over armed police could better address a community's needs. Well, there's two key words there you seem to say, but not consider the implications of. Emergency response. In an emergency, what good is outreach? We already have a problem. What good is drug counseling? We are in the middle of a problem. What good is mental health when we are in the midst of a crisis? How can any of this reasonably take place within, or mitigate the circumstances of, an emergency? An emergency response is meant to dispel the emergency, to see to everyone's reasonable safety and end the crisis. Diagnosing and treating the causes or individuals involved can be dealt with once everyone is secure. Oftentimes the crisis is a person, endangering themselves or others. And depending on the situation, maybe a mental health professional would be of use, say in the case of someone threatening to jump off of a bridge. Otherwise, the resources listed here are more often reactive, after things have already reached a breaking point. In the onset of that breaking point, something bad has already happened or begun to happen. Therapeutic efforts aren't going to do much in that moment.
How can we triage this? not using the police as the portal. Because what we also know is that people want to have solutions to their problems, but they don't necessarily want to be funneled through the justice system.
I need a concrete example, even just a hypothetical. I need to hear how this works in the worst case situation, because knowing how the worst case situation is handled gives me a metric by which I can assess whether or not the idea holds water in the worst and down to the simplest. What do you do about someone holding a gun to the head of a child? What do you do with the person suspected of murder on a high-speed car chase in a residential area? How does this alternative address those scenarios, which are not any kind of hyperbolic fantasy? Another block of text with music, so here we go. The New York Times recently reviewed FBI data from 10 cities about how police spend their time. Got it.
According to the study, police in cities across the country spend about 30 to 40% of their time responding to totally non-criminal calls.
Totally non-criminal calls. So, citizens called the police about something and it turned out to be nothing? Or at least nothing criminal. But the police responded when they were called upon, regardless. Got it.
But across the 10 cities, it was only about 0.5% to 1.8% of their time that police were dealing with what some think police are there to deal with: violent crimes, including assaults, rape, murder, and shootings.
What some think police are there to deal with: violent crimes, including assaults, rape, murder, and shootings. So, is there some contingent of the population that thinks assault, rape, murder, and shootings are things police shouldn't be there to deal with? I'm confused. Another block of text. Advocates say other types of first responders are better suited for handling the majority of non-violent or non-criminal cases. So, how do you know a situation is non-violent or non-criminal until after you show up to assess it? If there's a call of blood on the sidewalk leading up to a house, did someone only cut their finger and run home for a bandage? Or is there a violent murderer holed up in the home with a hostage? Do you just take a guess and send a social worker to go knock on the door? Or do you send someone trained to handle most emergency situations who is also armed in case the worst comes to pass?
We have to stop assuming that law enforcement, that the first responder that is law enforcement, can and is willing to address a level 2 problem with level 2 force.
Again, how do you know the level of a problem until after someone has shown up to assess it? And is a presumed level 2 problem that turns out to be a level 4 problem going to be best handled by a level 2 responder?
Instead, what we see is that problems get addressed with the same level of force. And so asking law enforcement, who are probably overworked, over-traumatized, and unsympathetic at this point to certain kinds of calls.
Unsympathetic at this point. I'm sorry, who is making police out to be unsympathetic? All police, not just some, but all police. Making police out to be unsympathetic is the entire point of this initiative, isn't it? That they are savage, unthinking barbarians just itching to use a .357 Magnum to get a cat out of a tree. Give me a break.
Are using the same kind of adrenaline and the same kind of tactics to deal with an armed robbery as they are dealing with someone who's mentally ill. And it's not safe for communities.
How are police to know someone is mentally ill? And even if they do know that someone is mentally ill, and this mentally ill person is running at someone with a cleaver, what should the police do? Extend an insanity defense to that person in the moment and just let them get it out of their system before they stop themselves? What exactly is the alternative you are suggesting here? Another wall of text. Systems like this already exist in some cities in the country, including Eugene, Oregon's Crisis Assistant Helping on the Streets system. Crisis Assistance Help. Cahoots. The name of this program is Cahoots. Got it.
Where is that money going to go if it's not going to law enforcement? And our response is, what we see on Cahoots is crisis is informed by an inability to meet basic needs, an inability to access resources.
Oh, I understand. A serial rapist's inability to access getting laid is what leads them to crisis. So in order to avoid crisis, you need to meet the needs of the serial rapist. Yeah, I really don't want to follow that train of logic any further.
And so when we're looking at how a community could use public safety dollars for true safety of the public, we need to be looking at things like basic needs, mental health services, better substance abuse treatment, low barrier shelters. And when we talk to these folks that really just don't want to see any of that money get cut from that police budget, then what is the alternative? How else are we going to be able to meet those needs?
Why can't these things work in concert with one another? Why do you make it out to be an either-or situation? Why is it either police or social services? And again, when has there ever been some reasonable belief that solving homelessness, addiction, and mental health was ever the realm of law enforcement? I really must be missing something. Another wall of text. A bill for a community response initiative was introduced to the California legislature in February 2020. Got it.
How can you solve problems without going through that system? Because once you're in it, you never get out of it. And folks don't always want that to be the solution.
Yes, I am sure that criminals do not want to end up in our criminal justice system. In fact, I think I am safe in saying that, for criminals, getting caught by law enforcement is their least favorite option. And then we have a text card that reads, 88% of voters support the creation of an emergency responder corps. So California wants, essentially, an unarmed social services team instead of police. Got it.
We can tie this into 911. We can tie this into our community-based services. And we actually don't need law enforcement to be the first ones to respond. We can work in partnership with them, sure. We can work in partnership with a lot of folks, but that's not the goal. The goal would be to have community-based services responding to the community's needs.
Violent crimes, assault, rape, murder, shootings. Assessing an ambiguous call as being a level 1 versus a level 5. Or how about a level 1 that becomes a level 5 due to unforeseen circumstances? None of these scenarios are addressed here, or really in any other of the arguments I have heard regarding a reduction, replacement, or outright elimination of law enforcement. Is our system of policing in need of review and reform? Most certainly, and continuously. Becoming complacent with those people or institutions who are empowered to preserve and, if necessary, take life in order to enforce our laws is a very dangerous notion. But unfortunately, our laws are an acknowledgement of the capacity of human beings to do incrementally worse and worse things to one another, and police officers are tasked with having to be prepared to face the incrementally worst and worst among us at any given moment. Micromanaging emergency response into sending individual teams of specialists, whose utility could only be determined after a lengthy post-crisis evaluation, into crisis situations who are otherwise untrained and unarmed, unable to defend themselves or anyone else should the worst come to pass, is a whole other crisis in the making. Baby, bathwater. This whole movement wants to toss them both. So how about we keep the baby and just clean the water? As always, thank you for watching.